thank you for joining me today. I'm Eva Medilek, and I'm so excited about who I get to talk to today. I have a special guest, Michele Mariscal. Michelle and I met at a eWomen Network event, and when she told me about what she does and who she is, I thought, you know what, this would really benefit my audience. So basically, Michelle is an advanced grief recovery method specialist. So she helps people process those challenging emotions of grief, anxiety, and loss. And I know there are so many of us who have experienced grief, especially probably more multiplied since COVID has hit a lot of people differently. And I know personally people in my circle have been diagnosed with cancer, have been dying of cancer. I lost my mother literally, Michelle, 6 years ago on Sunday, and still really find that grief process interesting. So I'm really excited to talk to Michelle about what she does and the way she works with her clients, either one-on-one or in small group format. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you for gracing us with your expertise.
Thank you. And I'm always so happy to be able to speak more about this topic because it's one of the topics that we shy away from most and what I think needs brought out of the shadows the most.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a day for me where I don't open Facebook and see either somebody just grieving the loss of a pet, which is a very real grief experience, a loved one. Um, we grieve life-changing situations. I'm sure grief comes in all forms, and I don't want to assume here, but tell me and our audience a little bit about grief in general.
Sure. Yeah. And in my work, I talk about over 40 different kinds of loss, and some of those can be intangible. An example, many of us across the country have been going through natural disasters, storms of many different kinds. So that can cause not only the tangible loss of property, but then this indwelling loss of safety, maybe a loss of trust if you feel like things weren't handled in a way that you had an expectation. So those can be some of the intangibles I think that many of us have been working with and through fairly recently. And then all of those tangibles, the loss of a loved one and pets, our family members, they are loss of a loved one. And there's an analogy that I like to use to kind of explain how grief, because 100% of us are grievers, 100% of us. So if you can imagine when you were a child and you were given your little backpack, and every loss that you sustain is like picking up a rock and putting that rock in your backpack. Now, if you were a child, a lucky child, who had adults around you and had support systems that supported you in processing your emotions, perhaps some of those rocks were pulled out because you were able to actually process the loss. But what I find by and large is that many of us, there is a point, let's say we have that loss of that loved one that suddenly our life feels like it's turned upside down and inside out, and it's hard to even make a decision about what to have for dinner. And I explain this sense that grief is cumulative and it's negatively cumulative. And if we think about that analogy of the backpack, we can understand it from a weightiness standpoint that we've been, and in this culture, sadly, we've been enculturated to do grief through these many different kinds of myths, like time heals, or just replace the loss, or don't feel bad. And that may sound kind of the opposite of the message that we should get. And the way I explain that one is that none of us, when we're supporting another person in grief, none of us are coming from this place of wanting to do harm. But those of you who may have experienced the death of a loved one and heard things like, oh, they're in a better place, or you were so lucky to have had so many years of good marriage. So that it's subtle. It's subtle how we hear that don't feel bad. We never hear that exactly, but those things that I just said are very subtle ways that we have learned to just have people not feel what they're feeling, or it's kind of this sense of, well, I don't know what to say. So this feels good, like just acknowledging that they were so lucky. So it's never coming from a place of harm, but some of the things that we, in fact, bring to these conversations can be very harmful to grievers.
I can imagine because I think as human beings, we naturally want to try to make the person feel better. And,
Mhm.
my thought is maybe they don't want to feel better. You
Mhm.
know, I know for me personally, I get a great sense of, I don't know what to call it, comfort, but I need to feel bad. I want to feel it. I want to feel all the emotions. It's part of the process for me of not kind of stuffing it down and burying it. And so, when it came to, I'll just say the loss of a relationship, right? A boyfriend breaks up with you, you have your heart broken. You grieve that legitimately, right? And I know for me, wallowing in love songs and watching teary movies is what brings it out of me. When I lost my pet, my beloved Winston, we watched a lot of doggy movies and cried at doggy movies. It was just kind of the release. And it's almost like, and I could be saying and probably using the wrong words, but when someone is encouraging you to feel better, it's almost like minimalizing the emotion that you have. And, you know, and I know when I've been in relationship with people who've lost a close loved one, the only thing I could think of saying, that's really effed up.
Mhm.
That sucks. And I can't imagine what you were going through.
Yeah.
And I'm here, you know, without trying to make them feel better, or because I don't think there's anything I could say to make anybody feel better when they're grieving whatever their loss is, right?
Mhm. Yes, and you're really pointing to what we feel makes it so hard for us in supporting another is, oh my gosh, this is so hard for me to witness this, my my bestie feeling so awful. And it's a part of this enculturation that we don't feel like, and we don't know that grief is actually very normal and natural. And of course, it would be normal that you would cry in your tissues for weeks on end if this thing happened. And the best, I love what you said about we don't know what to say, and sometimes the best thing to say is, I'm here. I'm just here for you. And I don't know what to say, but just know that I'm here. Yes. And it is really, I think we are starting to recognize that the feeling, letting ourselves feel what we're experiencing is the way through. We can't bypass grief. We can,
That's not healthy
but
though.
we make it very unhealthy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound healthy. Yeah, and I recently, a client I had worked with for a year, shared his cancer journey with me through WhatsApp. And I felt very honored that he chose to share that with me because our coaching relationship was over. And, we had talked about, maybe resuming it again at one point. And, you know, It was pretty much a terminal cancer diagnosis, and, he had reached out to me several times, and I was just like, "Holy crap, what do you say to somebody who's saying, it's stage 4, it's terminal," and, I would ask questions about his family, his wife, his child, but the one thing I could say is, you know what? All I can do is pray for your strength and your resilience and your ability to go on this journey in the way you choose, and that was it. I didn't want to say, oh, you could beat this, oh, you could heal this, or recommend I read a story about this person who healed themselves because I didn't think that that would be helpful. But I did let him know that I do have some contacts in my, some resources in my contacts that if he were interested, I'd be happy to share. But it's not my intention to impose. But it was really an exercise for me, Michelle, to support someone without trying to minimize what they're experiencing or catastrophize it as well.
Mhm.
But just to
Mhm.
feel like a warm hug is what I wanted to like, you know
Mhm.
what, if I can support your family in any way, I'm
Yes.
here.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was so hard.
It is very challenging, and sometimes when we can be so present for another, we talk about how um there's cure and there's healing. And I have seen so many times in that process of a terminal disease where people do, when they stay and they almost insist that others stay very present to what is so, there is a lot of healing that can happen in relationship, in acceptance, they may go through some different emotions, and that's okay. It's all grief is, I always go back to, grief is normal and natural. Yes. And the best thing we can do, you keep coming back to it, is being present for another, and so present that they feel it's safe for them to just be. I haven't, just an example of, I feel like when my brother, the most recent family member of mine who died, when he received his terminal cancer diagnosis, it it occurred to me very quickly that he was never going to speak about death, because in his mind, in his way of thinking, giving into that felt like failure to him somehow. So he was out of state, and I was going up once a month or every 6 weeks for about 9 months. And every time I would just be around him, I realized, it doesn't matter what I think. I may want to engage in conversation with him about, how are you feeling about all this? But in truth, we were just being together. We would watch TV, we would talk about funny family history stories, and that was his way of being with it. And even to the day before he died in the hospital, he said, I just want to get through this and get back home. And so it was just clear that for him, I mean, we know he must have known, but it's kind of like, in his process, he was just going along and being however he could be with it. And I wasn't going to change his mind. I wasn't going to engage him in anything that would upset him in any way. So that what I'm getting back to is really presence with people wherever they are with it is the most we can give them, because that gives them permission to be fully in their process, their grief.
And would it be the same for those of us who are left behind and grieving?
Yes, yes, and it gets, and I have to say, in family dynamics, sometimes that can be very tricky because people may be, we all have our own unique way of moving with emotions or not. And sometimes, especially in the death of a child, it's very common that if there's a marriage that had been intact, that marriage is so strained that it moves to divorce.
I've heard
Uh,
that.
because people can't find their own way of being able to get, just like you were saying, each of us needs to find that way of expressing those emotions and then be able to come back around with each other.
Yeah. So, you know, when you were sharing that story of your brother, I attended virtually my former client's funeral, and I heard his wife say, he was in contact with me. He thought he had 2 or 3 more months. He said, "I'm going to palliative care. They'll give me a couple of months to spend with my loved ones and my family and get my affairs together." And within 3 days, he was gone. And then his wife said at the funeral, you know, he just kept saying he wanted to go home. And so I'm just curious, is what home is for people when they say that, when they know that.
I just got goosebumps
Yeah.
because that was in my knowing that I, he may not have been able to engage in conversation at the level that I might have. Um, but I also felt that when my brother said that, and my other brother, who had died a couple decades earlier, he was saying that to my mom as well. And so there is that space in us, I think, that can find that knowing acceptance, and that may be a way that uh, people who are dying are very often very concerned with those who are left behind. So, while they may want to speak in certain ways, there may be a little bit of being strong. We can understand that. And maybe that going home, saying that in that way, is kind of that bridge.
Yeah, I think I remember my grandfather saying that too to my grandmother at one point. Yeah, he wanted to go to his mother or something like that. But here's what I would love to segue into as well. There's a couple of things because this is such a powerful, powerful subject with all types of grief and loss. So there's two things I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear kind of you know, if it's appropriate, ways grief shows up that we may not realize is maybe buried or unresolved grief. And also to talk more about the work that you do to help people grow through grief, if you will, or recover from it.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And this whole area of unresolved grief, and how do I know if I have grief that isn't processed yet? Some of the things I point them to look at is this. Uh, Sometimes there can be this irrational fear of future loss, um, meaning after a loss has occurred, if you begin to see that this is a habit that has now formed, that let's say your child said they'd be home at 11 and it's 11:05 and you have already got them dead on the side of the road, like that kind of
Oh,
irrational.
the Dateline thing. I always say to my daughters, I want the tracker on the phone. I want to know where you are every minute, just in case you're dead in a ditch, and I know where to find you, and I'm not looking for days.
Oh, I know. So, and that, I know that's an extreme
Yeah,
example,
that's kind of my
but
humor, but I see what you mean, like all not catastrophizing, but worrying excessively, like, oh my God, they're late. What might have happened?
yes,
Hmm.
yes, and it may show up in other things too. Let's take, for example, I live in my town is still not recovered from the hurricanes, and we're going into storm season. So I had to do the work. So it's quite the storm season, and my first floor neighbors still are not home because their homes are not redone yet. So, I realized there was a little quakiness, and I was already in fear of June 1 coming in storm season. So I did my work. I realized, oh, I didn't fully process all that. So I did the work, and now I'm back in the weather's the weather. I do my emergency prepping, and there may be a hurricane this year. So there's that ability to come back to neutral.
What's the difference between that type of experience and what they call PTSD?
Well, the trauma, traumatic loss, and any of the losses we may experience as trauma, and that may, PTSD is really it's a diagnosis now that's helpful to understand that, oh, my body is in this state of nervous system dysregulation.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and that can be, their grief can be a big part of that. And how I work with people, my piece of it, a few times I have worked with mothers who have found their children to suicide, and two of them were working with a trauma counselor and also doing the grief recovery work. And the grief recovery work is allowing you to go into the fullness of all of that pain. So what are all the hopes, dreams, and expectations that are now unmet because of the loss of your person? And also what can plague us is anything that comes up as a regret. Like we may start feeling and saying to ourselves, oh my God, if I had just da 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 da. So anything that we would have wanted to have been better or different or just more of, those are some of, when I talk about the rocks in the backpack, that those are the structured process that I help people go through, is to get out of the thoughts in our head, and in a very safe way be able to find and express in words what those experiences are that are causing the pain. And if we don't do that part of it, the PTSD part of us, the body part of it, can stay locked in longer. So I personally have found, for those people who have gone to that place where they can't function in life, they're like they can't take care of themselves, they're not sleeping because every hour they're waking up to this picture, that doing that trauma work sometimes first is important, or at least in tandem. Because the process that I use, the purpose of it, of the grief recovery method, is to help people complete their relationship to the pain that is a part of their loss. And a lot of times what people ask me is, well, I feel like if I do this work, I'm going to forget my loved one. I don't. So there's almost a way that we hang on with everything we have, pain and all, because we just don't want to forget. But the beauty is when you're able to do the work and express all those emotional communications that some we don't even realize are there, we're just having a lot of pain. What happens is the relationship is now intact on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level. And what you've been able to do is complete the pain of this physical level. And I like to explain it that way because before I had found the work that I do now, I am a trained energy healer. I was a spiritual counselor for 10 years. And I thought, if anybody, I should be able to get through this, right? And I wasn't getting through it. So there's, when we think about who we are as human beings, we do have all these different levels. And on all these levels, work does help. Sound healing, beautiful, wonderful. Acupuncture, wonderful. For me, because I live in an intellectual world and I'm a thinker. I needed that process that I could actually get those thoughts out of my head, go into my heart, and let myself feel what I was actually experiencing in the guilt, in the regret, in those can be really plaguing. So back to how might someone know, this ties right in. How might someone know if they have unresolved grief? Another way is if you notice that you have this kind of brewing anger, like you didn't used to be an angry person, but now just everyone just kind of gets on your nerves, and you may start finding yourself even withdrawing because people's whatever just drive you crazy, and you don't want to lose it, but you'd like to lose it. And you just may find these different places in your life that you have unexplained anger. And what that means is very likely you have skipped over some sadness that you just didn't let yourself. I was talking to a friend of mine today, and just going through grief, and she said, Michelle, I put on music and I just danced for an hour. I laughed, I cried, there was sadness that I didn't even know was there. So again, there's different ways of being able to express it. So yeah, unexpressed anger, irrational fear. Another one is in this audience, and I was this person, over busyness, overworking to the it's almost like, well, if I just do this, that, the other, and do this thing
Yeah, you're
too,
distracting yourself from the
I don't
emotional.
even have to feel what's
Yeah.
really there. I was the queen of that. I had to learn, and my health suffered. So don't do what I did.
Do as I say, not as I do, as I did in the past. Wow, this is really, really fascinating and eye-opening. I would love to know and just share with our audience how people can get in touch with you, because I'm sure you touched on so many things where I'm sure people can see themselves in. And if they desire to get through that, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure, yeah. And the gift that I'm leaving with you is just some ideas, 6 ways that you might inquire within yourself, how, to see, do I have unresolved grief? So there'll be contact information if you pick that gift up, but also energym.org. That's my
Energy
website.
M, the letter M as in
Letter M.
Michelle,
Mhm.
.org to
.org.
learn more
Yes.
about Michelle and her work.
Yes, and I always offer free consultations. And, when I speak with people, I can help them determine where they're at. It may be, if it's not me, there may be other resources. They may be ready for something else. So I can help you tease that out, where you're at in your journey. And yeah, and also let you know what the work that I do, how that works.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I can't wait to take advantage of your free gift. We're going to put everything in the show notes under this video so that you can click directly on Michelle's free gift and learn some more ways that grief can be showing up or impacting you, and a little bit more about the work Michelle does to help you get through it, recover from it, process all the words, right?
Yeah, be with, be with.
Be
Yeah,
with,
that's lovely.
be with, it's presence. Yes, that's what was the overarching message is to be with it. And I think a lot of humans have a tendency to avoid anything that's hurtful, anything that's painful. We want to run as far away from it as we can. And like you said, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. It will pop up in another area like an angry pimple with anger and instead of you didn't feel sad, but you got mad at this person over here. We see that a lot in the movies, I'm sure, but how it manifests in real life is very real too. So thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I so appreciate being able to talk about this. And
Yeah, it
yeah,
was so helpful to me. And I realized after meeting you, the number of ways grief has hit me and what I was able to be with and process, what I've just kind of gone through life just, well, that happened kind of thing. There's so many, areas, and I think the world is grieving so many losses, tangible and intangible, that having someone like you that could help us be with it is going to be powerful. So thank you for serving us the way you have. We appreciate you. And again, everything to contact Michelle will be under this video in the show notes. So thank you all for watching and have a great day.
thank
Bye.
you all.